that which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked upon, and our hands have touched, the word of life.
Well, welcome to the amazing collection, The Bible for Women, book by book, and I am so glad you could join us today because we are going to be looking at the book of the Song of Solomon. And it is well, you may be a little shocked to see what's in the Bible. It is a book about romantic love, and parts of it really are just amazing. I tell you, this love thing, it is a mystery, isn't it? I remember November 8th, 1962. I was 16 years old. You do the math. And my boyfriend had just broken up with me, and I was miserable. I was miserable all day in my high school. Everyone knew I was miserable because I cried all day. That evening I got home, and another young man happened to just call me, and he just had such sympathy. He said he was sorry that my boyfriend had broken up with me, and before I knew it, we were talking, and I was laughing and just enjoying the conversation. He was about ready to hang up, and he said, "Now, I'm going to call Janet and ask her out for Friday night." She was a beauty. He'd been dating her for just a couple of weeks, and he said, "And if she can't go, would you like to go out?" Well, I didn't have anything else to do. I said, "Sure." He called back an hour later, and he said, "Janet can't go. You want to go somewhere?" I am forever grateful that Janet could not go out that night. And indeed, we went out Friday night. We went to the movie Hatari. We got into the Lyric Theater. The movie started. I heard a laughter that sounded very familiar. I turned around. My mother and father were sitting right behind me. And I should have been embarrassed. But you know, I wasn't. I felt so comfortable with this young man. Later, we went to a little neighboring town. There was a dance hall there, and all the teens went to it. And we went there. It was pouring down rain. We had to park on the other side of the highway. I had on new shoes, and he said, "But you've got new shoes on, and so let me just carry you across the street so you won't get your shoes dirty." Well, there was a ravine there, and I thought it was very gallant of him, and he picked me up, and he started across, and we started down that ravine, and he fell. And we both went rolling to the bottom of the ravine, and there I was. My shoes were ruined, but so was everything else I had. I was laughing so hard, and so was he. He should have been embarrassed, but he wasn't. We were just so comfortable together. And I went home that night, and I wrote in my journal, "I so hope he asks me out again." What is it about love? It is such a mystery. Listen to what the writer of Proverbs wrote. Proverbs 30:18 through 19. "There are 3 things that are too wonderful for me, 4 things that I do not understand. The way of the eagle in the sky, the way of a serpent on a rock, the way of a ship in the middle of the sea, and the way of a man with a maiden." You see, love is a mystery. It is a mystery. Who can figure it out? Now, Solomon wrote those words. He was the wisest man in the world. And if he can't figure out love, chances are you and I can't either. If you will, just open to the Song of Solomon. This is the last of the 5 poetical books. It is a beautiful love poem. Actually, it's considered one of the most exquisite love poems that have ever been written. It is a dramatic poem. It tells a story. However, you're going to find that there's some problems with this book. You're going to run into some confusing things. They figure that it was written by Solomon. Now, it doesn't say it was written by Solomon, though his name is mentioned 6 times. But here's why we think it was Solomon. There are 21 plants mentioned in this little poem. There are 15 animals. It was a man that had a great deal of knowledge. Solomon had a great deal of knowledge. It talks about the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom and calls it Israel. So this was before the kingdom divided. Solomon would have been the perfect author for this book. It obviously takes place in Israel, and it is believed that he probably wrote this book in his younger years, before his heart was divided and turned away from God. Here are some of the problems that you're going to find with this book. There are absolutely no religious themes. Therefore, you'll never hear anything about sin or grace or the temple or law. There are no religious themes at all. In fact, there's one time that the word Lord is mentioned, and even that, scholars are a little divided as to whether that means God. So it is a book with no religious themes. There are different interpretations. For instance, in the early Jewish communities, they believed that this was an allegory between, and it described the relationship between God and Israel. Later, Christians made it a typology and said it was a story that was about the relationship between Christ and the church. But honestly, ladies, if you read this, it's a hard stretch for that. We are going to address this as a literal interpretation, that this is a love poem, and it is a poem that describes the beauty, the passion, the sexual passion between a man and his wife. I told you about being in high school. Well, that boy took me out again and again. And after we had dated about 8 months, school was almost over, and he would be leaving for college. I would be staying in high school. And I remember one day he had walked me to my locker. My locker was at the end of the hall. And I had opened the locker door and was standing behind it, and he came up and turned me around and planted a kiss on my mouth right there behind that locker. Just as the door to the teacher's lounge opened up and Mr. Knuckles came walking out. Well, he caught us right there in the act, and he shook his finger at us and walked on. Later that day, I was in his journalism class, and he came up to me after class, and he handed me a note. And this is what it said. Take 2 lumps of clay, mold them and shape them into a statue of you and a statue of me. Now shatter them, clatter them, shape them again, one into a statue of you and then a statue of me. Now nothing can ever tear us apart. I sat there as a 17-year-old student, and I read that. And I looked at Mr. Knuckles, my journalism teacher, who I thought was ancient. He had to be 40. And I realized that he understood something about love. You see, when you're that age and you're in love, you don't believe that anybody that old really knows anything about love. And here Mr. Knuckles was saying, you know, kids, I understand right where you are. Right where you are. He knew something about love. Well, when we get to the book of the Song of Solomon, the writer knows something about love. When you open the book, chapter 1, the first line that it says is, this is the Song of Songs. Now, you have heard the term Lord of Lords, that Christ is Lord of Lords, King of Kings. And what that means is that he is the highest Lord above all the lords. He is the highest King above all the kings. This is the highest song above all the songs. This song stands head and shoulders above all the songs that have ever been written. And what we are going to start with right here is the courtship. We are going to get into it very quickly. It will cover chapters 1, 2 to 3, 5, and it is the courtship.
I met Jonathan when I was in high school. I was 15 and he was 17. We dated for 2 years in high school, and then when I went to college, we broke up. Kind of tried it one more time when I graduated, but it just wasn't the right timing. So we went our separate ways for what seemed like the final time. And I know he was in constant prayer about it, and I was praying about it over here by myself, and the Lord really spoke to both of us and let us know that we were the one for each other. And we knew once we got back together this time it was the real deal, and it was for the long haul, and there was a wedding at the end. When I think about getting married, I look forward to a lot of things. When we can be together and there doesn't come a point when he has to go home because it's too late and I have to go to bed and he has to go to bed, that we can go to bed together and he doesn't have to get in his car and drive home. I look forward to building a relationship that is like no other. I mean, I feel like he's my best friend right now, but I can only imagine the depth that our relationship is how it's going to change once we get married, and how we're going to be so much more intimate in all aspects, in our spiritual lives, emotionally, physically. Like, we're just going to become one, and it's going to be so much of a greater relationship that I can't even understand right now. I think I would be foolish to think we won't have problems. You know, you always hear about financial problems or problems with the kids. But right now, we don't have any problems. I just see a picture of just one big happy family.
The first thing that Solomon is going to just paint such a passionate picture for you is their mutual admiration for one another. They admire one another as people. The woman starts speaking first. She is referred to in many Bibles as the Shulamite, and it goes like this: "May he kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is better than wine. Your oils have a pleasing fragrance. Your name is like purified oil. Therefore, the maidens love you." What is she saying here? She is saying, of all the men in the world, you are the finest. No wonder all of those girls love you. You are the very best. And she longs for him to kiss her. May he kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. She is waiting for him to take the first stand. If you will turn with me then to verse 15, he responds. Listen to his words. "How beautiful you are, my darling. How beautiful you are. Your eyes are like doves." Now I want to stop right here a minute. When you come across this, you are going to come across a lot of things that he compares her to, such as, your eyes are like doves. And you're going to think, that's pretty silly. That's pretty silly. That's not the way we talk today. And some of them you're going to laugh right out loud. What I'm going to do is encourage you to think a little farther down the road as where he was. What he is saying to her is that of all the things in the natural world that he can see, he compares the finest of those things to her. And so when he says, your eyes are like doves, he is saying that they are bright, they are alert, they are innocent, they are pure. He is giving her the highest compliment. He is not making mockery of her. Instead, he is complimenting her. And she goes on in 2:4 and says, "He has brought me to his banquet hall. His banner over me is love." What a picture. She is secure under that banner, under his protection. That banner over her is love. He will respond to her. Now, I want you to listen carefully. In 2:7, Solomon is speaking, and he is speaking to a group of other women. It could be her friends. It could be the other women in the court. We aren't sure, but he says this: "I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or by the hinds of the field, that you do not arouse or awaken my love until she pleases." Do you know what he's saying here? Do not sexually arouse her until it is the appropriate time. He is putting boundaries on their courtship. He is putting boundaries on their love for one another. It is not the appropriate time. They are not married. She is not under the protection of marriage. And so Solomon himself puts boundaries on it. In verse 14, this is 2:14, He again goes on, my love in the clefts of the rocks and the secret place of the steep pathway. Let me see your form. Let me hear your voice, for your voice is sweet and your form is lovely. I am so grateful that God put these words in the Bible, because sometimes we can get the idea that holy courtship should be passionless, that holiness is devoid of pleasure and passion. And yet, God is showing us a picture of what He puts His stamp of approval on for the love relationship. This man is saying to this woman, let me see your form. I just love looking at you. You are so beautiful. Let me just enjoy the picture. And that he is speaking from his heart, and God puts His stamp of approval on it. And now the chorus speaks in verse 15. And once again, we are reminded that passionate love without the benefit of marriage must be protected by boundaries. Catch the little foxes for us, the little foxes that are ruining the vineyards, while our vineyards are in blossom. In other words, while we are passionately in love, don't let any of the little foxes come in that will ruin this relationship. Again, the relationship is to be protected within the passionate love that they have for one another. If you will turn with me, please, to verse 5. Chapter 3, verse 5. He will again emphasize the idea that there are boundaries on this love. I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or by the hinds of the field, that you will not arouse or awaken my love until she pleases. Boundaries. You see boundaries on her side and boundaries on his side. By the time we come to this verse, we are ready for the kids to get married, because they have expressed mutual love for one another, mutual admiration for one another. And now it's time for the wedding. We will not be disappointed. Verse 6, chapter 3, verse 6. What is this coming from the wilderness, like columns of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, with all scented powders of the merchant? Behold, it is the traveling couch of Solomon, 60 mighty men around it. Of the mighty men of Jerusalem, all of them are wielders of the sword, experts in war. Each man has his sword by his side. What is this? This is a military wedding. Solomon is coming for his bride, and he is bringing warriors so nothing will interfere with it. And it goes on, it says, Solomon has made for himself a sedan chair from the timber of Lebanon. He has made its posts of silver, its back of gold, its seat of purple fabric, with its interior lovingly fitted out. By the daughters of Jerusalem, go forth, O daughters of Zion, and gaze on King Solomon with the crown with which his mother has crowned him on the day of his wedding, on the day of his gladness of heart. Is this boy happy? This boy is happy. He can hardly wait. He has brought warriors with him to protect him, to make sure that he gets to his bride. And he has spent a lot of money on this celebration. He has made sure that this is a day set aside for the celebration of the joining of these two people who love one another so much. Well, that young man that dropped me in the ditch, I kept up with him, and I never stopped loving him. 5 years later, we finally got to the age where we could get married, and I was away from home during that time. And my mother gave me the gift of doing my wedding for me. So I would just call home and say, Mama, I'd like these flowers, and Mama took care of it. It was a wonderful present. And I came home just a few days before the wedding day, and I could not believe all of the work that had gone into this celebration. You see, like you all, Mama had a circle of girlfriends around her, and they really loved one another, and anytime there was a big celebration going on, they all came together and helped each other. And those precious ladies, those dear ladies, had just poured themselves out to make this wedding a great and beautiful celebration. And like so many of you, when you remember that day, I remember standing at the top of the aisle of the church on my father's arm and looking down that aisle at that man. And I could not believe or just hold in the great joy that I felt. And as I started down that aisle, I got about halfway down, and I want to confess to you, this was my thought. I can't wait till the honeymoon. I can't wait for the honeymoon. That this is such a beautiful, fun time, but what I'm looking forward to is a time when we can truly be one. I can't wait for the honeymoon. I think Solomon was thinking that same thing, because after the day of his gladness of heart, it gets right into the honeymoon. Now, I want to tell you, ladies, that this part of this book is very descriptive. It is very sensual, and you might be shocked. I want you to understand that God has put his hand of approval on this wonderful relationship between man and wife. You see, they have waited until a time where they could wrap that sexual experience under the banner, under the protection of married love, and now they are free to join one another in complete freedom, complete joy, no guilt, no shame, just pure, passionate love. So once you get to chapter 4, that's the beginning of the honeymoon, and he starts off with, "How beautiful you are, my darling. How beautiful you are." And he begins with her eyes, and he begins to work down her body. And then when you get to 12, listen to what he says. "A garden locked is my sister, my bride, a rock garden locked, a spring sealed up." And what he is saying is that she has kept herself pure for him alone, and that garden has been locked. He also calls her first his sister and then his bride. You see, all of this time of courtship, they have had the great advantage of simply getting to know one another as friends. Here, these lovers have spent time together sharing their hearts before they share their bodies. And so they come so confident in one another's love, so protected, so secure. He knows her first as his sister, his friend, and then his bride. She is not a game player. She is not going to withhold. And in verse 16, she says, "Awake, O north wind, and come, wind of the south, make my garden breathe out fragrance. Let its spices be wafted abroad. May my beloved come into his garden and eat its choice fruits." She is inviting him. I am completely yours. I will withhold nothing from you. Enjoy me, not playing games, simply free to be all she can be for her beloved. There's a pause now in the poem. Chapter 5. "I have come into my garden, my sister, my bride. I have gathered my myrrh along with my balsam. I've eaten my honeycomb and my honey. I have drunk my wine and my milk." Words from a husband who is satisfied and contented and perfectly joyful. That is the end of the honeymoon, except for one last comment. And many scholars think that this is said from God himself, as if God is looking down upon the lovers and again just reassuring them that he is so pleased with their love for one another. "Eat, friends, drink and imbibe deeply, O lovers." Do you remember when Adam was in the garden and he was by himself? And our great God looked at Adam and said, "You know, this isn't good. It is not good for man to be alone." And he brings Eve to Adam. And here we see God looking over his children, deeply in love, having done things well and right under his great plan for them. And he is saying, this is good. The great stamp of approval from God Himself. I'm very grateful God does not end the book there, because you see, life is not all honeymoon, is it?
My wedding day was the most amazing, perfect day. I remember when I was waiting to walk down the aisle, I was with my dad, and I looked at him and I said, "Dad, this is the most wonderful day." And my dad started crying. He's like, and it was like he wanted to tell me it was, to him too, it was perfect. I was a virgin when I married. I had been thinking about this all my life. After the honeymoon, you come home and you have to go to work together, and you got to start doing normal things together, and then you got to really start communicating. And I think that's where we started probably butting heads, because we're both very passionate people, and I don't know if we really knew how to communicate. I knew if we kept focusing on God, that we would learn how to communicate, and that we would learn how to get through this first year, learn more about each other. It sounds weird, but when we would go through weird times, sometimes I'd go back to that wedding day and say, remember what I said to him? I said I would lay at his feet or go where he goes, I will follow him. I was going to honor him. And it was like, if I didn't have that wedding day with 400 people standing there watching me make this commitment, and if I didn't have that day where my dad walked me down the aisle, and it was such a serious, moment where he gave me away, then it would be so easy to back out of this. And so to me, my wedding day was so huge in my life, because I made this huge commitment in front of people that were all there witnessing it, all my friends, my family, but also my God. At first, you get slammed with reality, and it's hard, but like I said, what kept me stable was going back, and that verse, waters cannot, they cannot quench love, and rivers will not wash it away. I believe that God was present at my wedding day, that He was going to be there, He was going to help us, He is the counselor, and that love is most powerful. And like the other verse says, love covers a multitude of sins.
It's a shock to me that you go to bed a bride and wake up a wife. You see, brides don't do things like the cooking and the ironing and the laundry and picking up the dirty socks. Brides are simply pampered princesses who have to look pretty and be admired. But the day comes when every bride has to wake up in the morning and has to get out of bed and take off the beautiful peignoir and start cleaning house. It happens to all of us, and I must say that to most of us it's a tremendous shock, because as we're thinking of getting married, we never get to the house cleaning part. We just think of the enjoyment of just having our husbands think we're wonderful all the time. And I tell you, I just love it that God does not leave us to fantasy life. The honeymoon is over.
I met Chip at Auburn University, and we played in a bluegrass band together. He played the banjo and I played the violin. One day we were just strumming away together, and I looked over and I thought, he's pretty cute. I think I'm interested in him. Our first date was turkey hunting. I was actually in a friend's wedding the night before, came all the way back to Auburn, left at 3 o'clock in the morning, went out into the woods, and I can't believe my parents let me, because I went out in the woods with a man they didn't know that well, and he had a gun. And we had a great time, but I've never been turkey hunting since, because he caught my heart, and that's all he needed. We dated for a very short time, and after about 3 months, he talked to my father about getting married, and believe it or not, my dad said yes. We decided after 5 years that we were ready to move on to the next stage and have our first child, and we had a little girl, Sydney, and then less than 2 years later, we had a little boy, Coulter. And so that kind of changed our entire life right there. I think the change was that I tend not to be a very affectionate person, and I always have to remember when Chip comes home, I have been coddled and holding and kissing and picking up and with kids hanging over me all day long, and I'm ready for a break. But when Chip comes home, he's ready to be coddled and kissed and hugged, and he wants that physical affection, and I feel like I've given it all day long, and I haven't saved any for him. And so it's really just been a challenge for both of us to understand each other's needs, what I need and what he needs, and to also understand that it's important that we nurture our relationship first, because in a few years those kids are going to be gone and we're still going to be with one another, and we want to be left with our marriage still healthy and intact so that we can enjoy being together once the children are gone. A lot of times we've tried to keep God out of the picture, and we've just come back again and again, and we realize that truly, without Him in the middle of our relationship, that we'll never be have the kind of family or marriage that we desire without God.
If you will start in chapter 5, verse 2. This poem has some very great difficulties in it. When you try to interpret it, it is very difficult. It is a lyric idyll. It is an oriental poem. And so sometimes you'll be reading along and you'll think you'll really understand what's going on, and all of a sudden something will be dropped in there that kind of, you can't quite figure it out. Well, this immediately changes from the honeymoon to a problem in marriage. And we're going to have this problem right now. A voice, my beloved was knocking. Open to me, my sister, my darling, my dove, my perfect one, for my head is drenched with dew and my locks with the damp of the night. What's he saying here? He is saying, I've come home late from work. I'm late from work. I've come home and I know you're in bed already, but open the door because at last I'm here. Well, you know what? She really doesn't care. I think she's irritated with him because she says, you can just hear her whining in this. I've taken off my dress. How can I put that on again? I've washed my feet. I don't want to get them dirty. I don't want to get out of bed. I'm all comfy and cozy here. The door's locked, honey. Go sleep on the guest room bed. You see, she has gone from being a true, great admirer of his to being a little apathetic. The wife part has started settling in pretty quickly here, and she has lost her deep passion, her great zeal for him, her tremendous desire to please him at every turn. And ladies, I tell you, it happens to all of us. And here God has put this in His Word because He wants to warn us. This will happen. You see, when she has done this, she has taken a brick and started building a wall. You see, all walls in marriage are simply one brick at a time. And she has just put a brick up and started to build the wall that comes in so many marriages. I'm very grateful that is in there. Well, that young man that I loved so much in 1967, by 1977, I didn't love him very much. And I remember the night came when I took my wedding band off and I handed it back to him and said, I quit. I cannot be married to you anymore. The pain is too great. I can't stand it. I quit. And with that, I picked the last brick up and I put it at the top of the wall, shutting him totally out. It is a miracle to me that that man took that brick, put it back down, handed that wedding band over the wall and said, let's give it one more chance. You see, at that point, he chose to take the brick down and start to try to take the whole wall down. I will tell you, ladies, we could never have taken that wall down until we added one more person to the equation. Eleanor told you in the book of Ecclesiastes, 3 is the best way to go. And we had to add that third one to our love relationship, to our broken marriage, in order to heal it, because we had been married 10 years and we had no idea how to be married. God put so much information in His Word about marriage. Song of Solomon is a huge help. It's a great start. But there's so many other places where God gives us very clear guidelines. This is how you work in a love relationship. This is how you strengthen that marriage. This is how you respond to one another, because God is so interested in that marriage not having those walls. You know what our little Shulamite did here? after she had realized she had really messed up, after that man had left and he did not go to the guest room, he went out in the streets, and it occurred to her, I have made a terrible mistake. Instead of staying in that bed saying he deserves it, I have been waiting up all night for him, his dinner is getting cold, and I'm not going to give an inch. She jumped out of that bed and said, I will go a mile if I have to, but I will bring my beloved back to the marriage bed. And that is exactly what she does. And he forgives her, and he praises her. You are my beloved, my darling, as lovely as Jerusalem, as awesome as an army with banners. And she receives her back, and they begin again to walk in marriage with no walls.
Robbie and I met when I was teaching school, and his brother started dating my sister. And they got married, and a year later we got married. When we first got married, we were very idealistic, and both have very relational personalities, so we have always gotten along very well, have not had huge struggles in our marriage until we had teenagers. And when our kids got to be maybe the end of middle school and on up into their teen years, we started to see how our personality types differed so much, and the things that were important to me as far as raising teenagers were a little different than the things that were important to him. He is a fixer and feels very responsible for the way that they turn out. And I'm much more relational in that I want to understand them and have a strong, close relationship. It's easy to forget what an awesome job God did in putting us together, and it's easy to start being stressed over how the other one does it differently. I think we were very haughty when our kids were young, that we had this awesome marriage that nothing could penetrate. And it's really showed us our own hearts to see how easily we can become critical and judgmental of each other. It has taken us to a step that we would not, to a place where we wouldn't be if we hadn't gone through the issues of learning how to work together and be parents of teenagers.
At the end of the book, she takes another big step in this marriage. You see, she is a woman of great kind words, and she's also a woman of great action. She invites him to go on a vacation. I personally, after living with a man now for 35 years and beginning just a little bit to understand them, I see that sometimes you have to do this. And I think she was probably married to the king here, and he was working way too hard, and she knew that he needed a vacation. And you know what else he needed? He needed his head turned back to her. He needed to be able to be freed of the burdens of work and to have been taken away somewhere where they could once again enjoy the love and fellowship and passionate sexual love with one another. So she invites him. She says, let's go to the country. And the last chapter, they go on this vacation. They enjoy one another. They reestablish the passion with one another. And at the very end, she says, hurry, my beloved, and be like a gazelle or a young stag on the mountains of spices. In other words, let's keep the romance alive.
I met Richard in high school. I was standing out in front of the school. He's on a bicycle. He comes across my toes and runs over me to get my attention, and he did. Richard and I have been married 55 years this September, and we're still attempting to have the type of life that the Lord would want us to. A wife, so often, after she gets the husband that she thinks is going to be perfect, then immediately she starts trying to make him more perfect. And I think I didn't understand that neither one of us are perfect, and we're not perfectible. A challenge for us, I think, after 54 years, maybe often is just that we can't do quite as much as we once did, because just a few years ago he could outwork a 17-year-old, and it's a shock to him that now he can't quite do that. I think that a man likes to know that his wife enjoys his lovemaking. The sexual side of marriage can maybe be even more fulfilling at this stage of the game, because you know each other better. I know what pleases him and what makes him happy. And it's good to be able to tell each other. So often maybe we think just about what our problem is and don't want to concern ourselves with what the husband's really feeling. Maybe he's so busy at work, or maybe he's having somebody approach him at work that shouldn't be, flirting with him or something. And we want to have the best things that we can for him at home. And I do pray that whatever I do or say, whether I'm cooking him a special meal or give him a back massage, whatever it would be as unto the Lord, because I'm doing it for Richard, but as unto the Lord.
God wants that marriage to be on fire until death do us part. I want my husband to be exhilarated by my love. Proverbs talks about that. It says, be exhilarated with her love. He's talking to young men. But I happen to think that if he's calling young men to be exhilarated by her love, she's got to be giving out some kind of love that's worth being exhilarated over. That I want him to drive in that garage at night and he can't wait to get out of that car because I'm going to be there waiting for him. And I'm so excited to see him. You know, I've learned so much from the Shulamite. First of all, she really was a woman of great words. It appears that she literally goes out among all of her friends and says, you know this husband? He is the greatest man I've ever known. He is a man of dignity. He is a man of great character. You never hear her out there saying, do you know what that guy did last night? He just irritates the socks off of me. She was praising him in the streets, praising him to her friends. Everywhere she went, her words oozed kindness towards him. She was a woman of kind actions. You see, she was humble enough to get out of that bed and go searching for her beloved. She was willing to humble herself and say, you know, I have made a mistake. I am so sorry, and went after him. She was a woman who was pure. And this is important. She kept her purity until the right time. Today, because of the sexual morals of the time, many women enter into marriage that are not pure. But I want to remind you that Jesus Christ is the one who can make us pure. And it is never too late, no matter what your background is, to come before the Father and confess that which you know was not proper and say, Lord Jesus, cleanse me. Cleanse me from this sin. And our gracious Father, by the blood of his own Son, cleanses you and makes you as pure as a virgin, because that's what he does. He is a God of great forgiveness. The Bible says that Jesus Christ is the bridegroom. In the New Testament, the very last book, when the new kingdom has come, it says Jesus Christ is the bridegroom and he is waiting for the marriage feast for his bride. You know who the bride is? You're the bride if you believe in Jesus Christ. It is the church made up of believers. What a picture. Marriage is for many women, and there are many women who will not know marriage for various reasons. There are women who have known marriage and now are divorced. There are women who have chosen to stay single. There are women who have chosen not to stay single but haven't found the right man. But yet Jesus Christ says, no matter what, no matter where you are in life or what your situation is, I am your bridegroom and I am enough for you. No one will love you like I do. No one will be faithful like I am. I am your bridegroom. I am your lover. I am your all. I am your full satisfaction. I am all you need for life.